This is my Werenado Druid build, and as you just saw, we did 5 quadrillion damage to that boss, and I just cleared a pit 135, which is the same level I got to with my Shred build. And considering I'm using almost the exact same gear, that means Tornado is comparable to Shred. So if you're looking for the top spot on the leaderboard, this might actually be an option. And to be honest, I don't even have my ideal setup yet. This build has everything you could want in a build, including high survivability, insane damage, and great sustain. This is the best that Tornado's been since seasons 1 and 2. So if you've been waiting on your chance to get back on Werenado, I'm going to walk you through everything you need to know to make the build as strong as possible. So sit back, relax, drop a like, comment, and subscribe, and come by my Twitch stream at twitch.tv/screamhard after the video. So if you've played my Sonic Shred build, you're going to see a lot of similar strategies. We're scaling damage in a similar way, and the build is mostly transferable. So if you're playing Sonic Shred right now, this is actually a really easy transition. Our main skill in this build is Tornado. When we cast Tornado, it's going to throw out tornadoes, and for whatever reason, they don't really stay visible, but they are there and they're doing damage. You can see the little wisps that are going around. Those are the actual tornadoes. That might just be my graphic settings, I'm not sure. But these tornadoes do a bunch of DPS, and we can spam them out insanely fast. We're also activating our Lightning Storm as well as our Hurricane when we first get into an area. The Hurricane's going to be spinning around us, and the Lightning Storm's going to be striking around us. The Lightning Storm does a bunch of damage, but it's also really helpful for stacking up our ferocity, which we can recast our Lightning Storm after getting max stacks to make the Lightning Storm even faster. But the Lightning Storm's also helping reduce the cooldown of our Grizzly Rage, which is our ultimate if you didn't know. Grizzly Rage is going to be increasing our damage by 200%, and it also makes it to where we heal when we kill things. Not to mention when we're in Grizzly Rage, we're constantly berserking, which is more damage. The Hurricane that's going around us is doing less damage, but it's weakening enemies and it's increasing our movement speed. Debilitating Roar can be cast in order to reduce enemy damage nearby, and that's a huge chunk, 45%, so it's very good for our safety. On top of that, while the Debilitating Roar is active, we're getting increased damage through our Dark Howl gloves. And then finally, we're using our Wolves, which is increasing our attack speed by 40% passively. But that only triggers after the Wolves get a critical hit. Now there's some pretty interesting mechanics that we're building around for this build. So first off, we're using Ifa's Dire Totem, which actually allows us to use our Grizzly Rage while we're in werewolf form. Technically, this build can also use Avatar of Nature, but this is a 200% versus a 35%. So you're much better off getting the Cornered Beast. And because our Grizzly Rage is a werewolf skill, that means we need the Dark Howl in order to be able to use our Debilitating Roar while we're in Grizzly Rage. Otherwise, if we were to take off our gloves, you can see that when we're in our ultimate, Debilitating Roar isn't even showing up on our bar. It's replaced with Blood Howl. Now, one of the most important things about this entire build is the Storm Shepherd set. And I highly recommend, if you want to start this build, to have the Storm Shepherd set, at least the 2-piece, because that makes it to where you no longer have a resource cost on your abilities. They're all spirit cost 0, or I guess the Hurricane doesn't show up for whatever reason. Either way, you don't have to worry about your resources anymore. But if you need a leveling build, you can check out my Chaos Storm leveling build. But once you have this 2-piece set, you're going to be spending your spirit instead of for your skills, it's going to be for damage. So if I attack, you're going to see that we now lose all of our spirit, and it came back almost instantly. The reason why that's coming back so quickly is because of our Blood Howl, and our Blood Howl is being triggered with Malefic Crescent. I'll talk more about the Blood Howl when we get to the skill tree. But if you're somebody that's been playing Shred, you're going to notice that the spirit recovers a lot faster with this than it does with Shred, which is part of why this actually gets so much damage. The other important part about the Storm Shepherd set is the 5-piece bonus. The 5-piece bonus is giving us a chance to triple cast and a chance to double cast, and whenever we use our Lightning Storm, it will snapshot either no damage bonus or the 500% damage bonus, which means that you can recast it as many times as you need to until you're getting the damage bonus. But that's not required to play the build effectively. You can clear all Torment 12 content, all bosses, and up through pit 130 without that bonus. So when I play, I actually don't even bother fishing for the bonus. I just activate it and I'm good to go. The 3-piece set's actually pretty important as well. It's giving us damage reduction, but it's also giving us our Cyclone Armor for free. That means that we can have Cyclone Armor, which is giving us a bunch of resistances, without actually having it on our bar. And you'll notice that we have a lot of things like that. So our Blood Howl is not on our bar. Our Cyclone Armor is not on our bar. Our Bulwark is not on our bar. Yet we're getting the effects of all of them. And our runes are also important. So our first 2 runes is going to be Pock Q. Pock is going to activate all the time whenever we're using our resources, and as you saw, they disappear and refill extremely quickly. That means that we're getting Bulwark constantly. Let me go ahead and activate everything so you can see how fast this actually comes on. Each time you see the rocks disappear and come back, that's recasting our bulwark. And every time that happens, we're getting 100% of our life as a barrier. So if the enemies manage to break through that 100% barrier, we're instantly putting another one back up, which makes us extremely tanky. And you know, this is one of those moments that happens sometimes, and you guys are gonna love this. I forgot to change my rune. We're not using a mobility skill. That means I just cleared that 135 without using my tool. I don't know how, but that's a big difference. So let me actually reconfigure this because in my written guide I have the correct ones. And I'm back from the magical world of testing things. So what I ended up deciding is that I'm running the POC Q so that we have enough survivability, and then we're just gonna have to settle for Igni Thule. And just so you know, a little movie magic, the intro at the beginning is actually the better attempt that I did while I was testing that. I had worse gameplay that I had put there originally. So for the gear, we're going for Gathlin's Birthright. This is important because it's a very good defensive item. You could use something like Harlequin's Crest, but the problem is your survivability. So Harlequin's Crest is perfectly fine if you're not dying, but I'd recommend Gathlin's Birthright overall. We're going with Debilitating Toxins on the chest armor, just to make sure we have as much survivability as possible. Dark Howl on the gloves. Again, this is giving us damage, but it's also good for survivability. Without the Debilitating Roar reducing enemy damage, it puts us in a much scarier position. Which I know because while I was testing just now, I tried Frostburn instead of Thule, just so we could get the freeze. And it just wasn't working out because the damage reduction with the additional Debilitating Roar is so much better. For the pants, we're using Tybalt's Will. This is giving us resource and a damage multiplier. For the boots, we're going with the Great Storm aspect. This is where we're getting our ferocity stacks from, and it also gives damage reduction. The weapon is going to be a little bit interesting because right now I'm running Crushing and I'm also running Azure Wrath. But ideally, I think the build is going to be best with a Mythic Azure Wrath because you get the extra percentage. And then on your Talisman, you're probably going to want to run Rustbitten Dirk. This is going to make bossing insane. And I think having the Azure Wrath on the weapon is going to make our AoE clear so good that we won't actually have to worry about the fact that we're losing some damage here. But worst case scenario, you can always use something like Fists of Fate, which is going to give you an average of 50% damage. Or just use my setup with the Crushing and the Azure Wrath on the Charm. Any of those combinations are going to work about the same, but I do think that the Azure Wrath on the weapon as a mythic with the Rustbitten on the Charm is going to be the best overall setup. For the amulet, we're going with the Malefic Crescent. This is what's making our Blood Howl cast automatically, and it gives us a damage multiplier. Do not forget that you're using Overcharged on your amulet as the additional cooling aspect. You put that on with the cooling tuning prisms, and you do that in the cube. That's going to give you an extra 30% damage, and it makes it to where we're constantly applying vulnerable to enemies with our storm skills. For the ring, we're running Archdruid's aspect, and we're running this because it's giving us the 60% from Werewolf, as well as the 60% from Werebear at the same time. Obviously, this is some kind of bug, but you don't have to do anything special, it literally just works. For ring 2, we're running Dirge of Erida. This is giving us a 70% damage increase, and it's also giving us some additional spirit. And then finally, we're going with Ifa's Dire Totem on our offhand, and this is giving us a big damage multiplier. And like I said, it's allowing us to use our Grizzly Rage while we're using Werewolf skills. For the Talismans, you're going for the 5-piece Storm Shepherd set, and you want Nature Magic skill ranks in each of those, and you either want resistances or chance to freeze enemies. There's a few other good things like movement speed and some other stuff, so feel free to use some common sense on what would actually be good. And for your seal, make sure you've got a +1 charm slot, and a damage multiplier or a critical strike chance is usually pretty good. Personally, I'd rather have the 20-something% damage multiplier, because on your gear, these multipliers, like all damage on this ring for example, are getting watered down by any other multipliers that go into that same category, such as physical damage or all damage. So I'd rather focus into the critical strike chance on my gear and get the multiplier on here. For the stats on your gear, you're going to try and go for max life on every single piece of gear, along with all resistance and armor on all of your defensive items. Certain ones are not going to be able to fit it. For example, your chest piece, you want to have max resource. So here you're not going to get an armor roll. On your helmet, you're going to want cooldown reduction and resource generation, so you may not get either, but you're going to have to work with your own RNG. And then on your boots, you want movement speed, so again, you're going to miss out on an armor stat. Just make sure you have at least one armor stat on your gear, but mostly resistances are what you need to not get one-shot by those circles on the ground. For your offensive aspects, you're trying to get crit chance on pretty much every item so you can get 100% crit chance. You can see that I'm sitting at 98.5%, And you'll notice that I've got masterwork bonuses into a lot of my critical strike chance. We've got it on the gloves, on our amulet, on our totem, and the temper on our weapon. Other than that, you're mostly looking for multipliers. So critical strike damage multiplier, vulnerable damage multiplier, all damage multiplier, and physical damage multiplier. Attack speed works perfectly fine as well. And willpower is going to be your filler stat. On the weapon, you can also do weapon damage too, which is perfectly fine. For the skill tree, we're maxing out our lightning storm. This still does pretty good damage, even though we're not focusing into the non-physical damage, because we are scaling a lot of storm damage. We're going for additional strikes. I actually have minimum strikes here. I intended to have movement speed. I'm not sure why that was. We're going for Werewolf, and we're going for Hero of the Storm. We're maxing out Tornado. We're going for increased duration, cast speed, Werewolf, and Explosive Tornado. For Bulwark, we're going to put as many points as it takes to get up to 100% barrier. 99% is perfectly fine. We're going for Fortify Healing, Travertine Bulwark so we can get those resolve stacks, and Overpower. For Cyclone Armor, we're going to be maxing it out. We're taking increased radius, reversal so we pull enemies in, and extra resistance. For Blood Howl, we're taking the base point. We're going for healing, Spirit Howl, and Unstoppable. This is where we're getting a lot of our spirit, because not only are we getting the big chunk of spirit whenever Blood Howl actually casts, but for 5 seconds after casting Blood Howl, which is 100% uptime, we're restoring spirit each time we hit an enemy. And the bonuses are doubled on critical strikes. So because we're always critical striking, we're getting 2 spirit each time we hit an enemy. And keep in mind, these tornadoes have a lot of small hits. And our lightning storm as well. That's why we have such good DPS on this build, because it's playing really well into the 2-set bonus for a Storm Shepherd set. And of course, Spirit Howl is what's making it to where we're getting spirit instead of max life. For Debilitating Roar, we're taking the base point. We're going for increased duration, Booming Roar, and cooldown. If you have any spare points, you can put an additional point here, just so you have a little bit of leeway over the duration to be able to cast it and not actually lose DPS uptime. For the Wolves, we're taking the base point, Thrill of the Hunt, and attack speed. For Hurricane, we're just taking the base point, movement speed, Derico, and weaken. For Grizzly Rage, we're taking the base point, cooldown reduction, Cornered Beast, and Fortify. One more note about your skill ranks on your charms. It's totally fine if you don't get nature magic and if you get something like shapeshifting or werewolf or storm skills. I'd prefer nature magic because that's going to benefit the largest majority of stuff, including your defensive ones. But shapeshifting and werewolf are going to be the next best, because those are going to go to things like your debilitating roar or your ultimate, which gives you more duration on both. For our Paragon boards, we're going with the Dominate on the first board. We're going with Outmatch on our second board, which is going to be the Constricting Tendrils board. This is what we're using to apply poison to enemies, which is important for the damage multiplier from here, as well as the damage multiplier from our Heightened Malice. On our Heightened Malice board, we're going to be putting the Spirit Glyph, then moving down, we're going with the Earth and Sky Glyph on the Thunderstruck board. Then finally, we're doing Lust for Carnage, and here we're going with the Fang and Claw. If you prefer to stay further back away from enemies, which is an option, although I think it tends to work better if you're close to enemies, but maybe you're trying to play safe, so if you are, you can swap this out and go for the Werewolf Glyph. That's going to give you extra damage reduction, which helps with that safety part, and it's not going to force you to be close to enemies to get the extra damage anyways. And these boards are pretty similar to my Sonic Shred boards, so you can use these right away if you want to from that. The only min-maxing difference between the Shred boards and this one is that this board is turned on its side 90 degrees clockwise, and that's going to save you like maybe a point or two. So I wouldn't stress about it, but that is a min-maxing option if you want it. For the gems on your gear, you're going to be going with Sapphire in the pants, Skulls on your weapons, and for your accessories, you're going to want a Ruby, an Emerald, and a Topaz. These should prevent the bulk of the worst things that really hurt, but still, you've got to make sure that you get enough resistances or you're really going to feel bad. And part of that is from Rahir. Rahir is going to give you 15% resistances to all elements, and he has a little safety bubble that you can hop in whenever he casts it. That's this one here. It redirects 90% of the damage that would have been dealt to himself for 5 seconds. So when you're in that bubble, you're basically immune. And then we've got Varyana for a little bit of attack speed. She's using Bloodthirst. That should about cover it for this build. If you guys have any questions, make sure you drop them in the comments below. And also let me know what builds you still want me to do. I can also do different variations of this one if you'd like to see what this would be like in other parts of the game besides pushing. If you're looking to level for this build, like I said, do the Chaos Storm. And don't be afraid to build this with legendary aspects from the recommended ones in the written guide. because this can work from pretty early in the game, especially if you run Cataclysm, like I do with my early game Shred. But thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in my Twitch stream at twitch.tv/ScreamHard. Daddy Druid out.
Subscribe to Screamheart. He's more than an old fart. He makes lots of fun builds. I promise his streams chill.